Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into the Owl's Nest. Today, the MVP race has begun. Who made the cut and who really deserves the 2020 Most Valuable Player Award? That's coming up today on the Owl's Nest. Welcome back to our regulars, and hello to any new viewers joining us. If this is your first time visiting the Owl's Nest, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like the video. Turn on the bell notification and leave us some comments about how you like the show. So we only have a few weeks left until the regular season is over and the MVP race has begun. We have the official list up over at overwatchleague.com. So just to give a quick run through of who we have here so far, we have Xe from the Paris Eternal, Alarm from the Fusion, Fleta from the Dragons, Carpe from the Fusion, Void from the Dragons, Choyobin and Violet from the Shock, Yaki from the Mayhem, and 2 from the Charge. We have Eileen and Krong. So why don't we go ahead and just kind of head our way down the list, Jake, sort of give our thoughts on who's here, why they're here, and then we can talk about some of our picks and maybe talk a little bit about who isn't on the list that we would have liked to see there. So Xe from the Paris Eternal. Jake deserves to be on this list?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, come on. Like, you got to watch this guy. He plays everything to an insane level. Whether it's, I think the McCree is, like, for me, his most iconic hero. You just want to see him on that hero. He was one of the first players to bring out the McCree a lot in that Genji meta. In terms of in the Summer Showdown in particular, bringing out the McCree, being ready to challenge the enemy Genji and stifling a lot of blades. Not to mention the rest of his gameplay being really solid. So. I think that's the hero I'm most excited to see him come out on, but he's also got an incredible Widowmaker, solid on the Sombra, the Tracer as well. So, I think this guy is just like kind of a classic MVP pick, just a hit scan god, and that's not something we've necessarily really seen in the MVP slot. It's just like that core main hit scan hero that is obviously so high impact this season and so consistent. A player like Xe clearly is deserving of this vote.
Yeah, I remember, when the feat season first started and they put him on the field, as you said, specifically on the McCree, just remember tweeting about how he murdered anyone that came into his crosshairs. He was out for a few weeks there in the middle of the season with, I believe it was a wrist or a hand injury of some sort. I can't imagine where he would be within this season if he didn't have that little bit of downtime within there. Of course, up next in our last video that we talked about yesterday, about the finals, we talked about Alarm and why he is on this MVP list. It's difficult for me sometimes. Obviously, when you look at DPS and damage players, it's really easy to see who they are, right? When they line up the kill feed, you can see the impact they have. I think it's a little bit tougher, especially for some casual viewers to try and realize where both support and tank players fall and how they affect the matchup when they're not constantly being spammed into the kill feed themselves. But again, when you look at the match against the Paris Eternal, Alarm really shows you why he deserves to be here. Being able to hit those pixel-perfect sleep darts, the way that he commands the field and shuts down, people like Sparkle or Xe even when he was playing that Sombra. If I remember correctly, we were talking to, I think it was Jane once on the show, who talked about the way that, I don't know if it was Alarm, but it was Funny Astro, it might have been both of them, but about the way that they communicated in scrims or when they were doing tryouts, and I think Alarm and probably Funny Astro together have become one of the best support duos in the league.
Oh, definitely. I think Alarm has had a ton of success in particular, and I think the nature of flex support is it is that flashier role rather than main support. You are going to make not necessarily bigger plays, but more high skill and unique plays. Like an Ana is like probably the perfect example, but I think what's pretty impressive about Alarm is that I don't even know that Ana is his best hero. Like, it's hard to tell between Bap, Zen, and Ana, and even some Brig that this guy can bring out at any time. I think the flexibility that he's shown, and more so than just being able to bring out those heroes, the fact that he's consistently dominant on all of them, he's making plays on all of them. I think it's pretty ridiculous to see. Usually there's a consistent, strong hero that a player has, like when they're known for being a lot more comfortable on this hero over that hero within their role. But with Alarm, I really think it's hard to tell because he plays incredibly well on all three of those core flex supports that we're seeing in the recent meta days, the Ana, Bap, and Zen. And he's just such an offensive playmaker with those heroes. Like, obviously, he's incredibly good at main support, or flex support rather. He does his job. He keeps the team healed. He gets his ults off. But that's like the baseline for Alarm. He's looking to make more plays than that. He's looking to find openings that other players might not, be aggressive where other players might be passive. And I think that is what makes him really an MVP candidate as opposed to just a strong player. The fact that he goes beyond what's traditionally expected of his role, but manages to do it without dying, without feeding and overextending, which is serious, like a tightrope act in terms of this role, because you are incredibly vulnerable to getting picked off. One false move, one mistimed aggression, and you're just going to die for no value at all. So the fact that Alarm hits that balance, that's what makes him an MVP candidate for me.
Well, and it reminds me too, the same thing that we saw out of Jonak in Season 1 on Zenyatta, completely redefining the way that people played that hero. Moving on to here, we have the next two, who I think are very similar. We have both Fleta and Carpe from both the Dragons and the Fusion. There's absolutely no surprise that the two of them are up here since their debut in the inaugural season. They have both been absolute superstars. But what is it that sets them apart from other DPS?
Well, I think Fleta and Carpe, what sets them apart is that they're incredibly good. Like they're just obviously sometimes, like a lot of games, you just see like, okay, this guy's just the best player on the server right now for both of them, I would say. And it's interesting because I think they both have broad hero pools, which is another consistent theme among the MVP candidates. They play a lot of heroes at that very top level. But I think they're both known also as like Widowmaker gods, in particular, having a couple huge moments this season. Like you think about Fleta clutching on King's Row, think about Carpe clutching on like every map he's ever played. Like these guys are just like fearless in the clutch. They have no issues playing under extreme pressure, which is something that I think anyone like casual or experienced can look up to and be impressed by, because anybody who's ever played video games knows those final moments, the pressure's on, it's all you to make the play, like how hard it is to just be normal in those moments. And to be somebody who can go not just normal, but can go into that fifth gear, can step it up when the pressure's highest, it's almost inhuman. It's something that I think a lot of people can't understand because it's just so incredibly rare that a person can really achieve that. And then for Fleta to have, to be transcending, I would say, like the core hit scan role, playing the Tracer, playing the Genji, playing the Sombra, like it doesn't seem to matter to him. He can bring out anything. I would say particularly the Genji and the Widow are two of like the heroes I want to see him on the most. But I think what makes those heroes special is that they're incredibly different and incredibly hard to master. That you have both of those heroes at the top tier in your hero pool. We haven't seen too much Pharah from Fleta this season, but that's another hero he's very good at. So there doesn't seem to be like a common theme among those heroes, which is weird, but it's also incredibly impressive. Like normally you see a player that is dominant on a hero, and the other heroes they're very good at are going to be similar. Like they're going to be really good at McCree, Ashe, and Widow, which makes a lot of sense, right? Those heroes have a lot of fundamental similarities in how they're played. But the heroes Fleta's incredibly good at are not even remotely similar to each other. We've got flankers, we've got projectile heroes, we've got hit scan, we've got backliner, we got tracking heroes. Like it's just every single fundamental skill that the game offers for you to master, it seems like Fleta has mastered.
This is why Fleta's always the meta.
Yeah.
So looking ahead to here, a few tank players that we have Void, Choyobin, and Krong have all been nominated in the tank position. Now, this is where I'm going to need your help a little bit here, Jake, because it's incredibly difficult, I think, again, unless they're just absolutely filling up the kill feed, to, I think, realize how well tank players are doing. Because when they're doing their jobs, it's usually the damage players that are going in there and, getting good plays, getting good kills, and lighting up that kill feed. So what is it that sets Void, Choyobin, and Krong apart from the rest of the tanks?
Well, you definitely have to look past the kill feed. I think when it comes to tanking, it is way more about space control. Like you are going to find those kills, but it's not so important who's getting the final blows. Like that's just not significant when it comes to the tank role. What's significant is that you're staying alive consistently and finding the openings in terms of the space on the map for your team, that you're asserting yourself in the right time, right place, so that your DPS players can succeed, so that your support players can stay alive. And if you fail to do those things, everyone is going to look bad. So I think the reason these players in particular are nominated is because their whole team is so incredibly strong, and that basis of strength, like the foundation of those team strengths, is their tank players. And that pretty much is how Overwatch works, right? Like a team is not going to look like a great team, like a top team, unless they have good tank players. It's just how it is. Like, obviously every role needs to succeed, but I think the tanks are sort of where a lot of teams are their fortunes are made or broken. And I think it's that's why you look at these players in the tank role, specifically like the off-tank role, I think, being incredibly high impact this season. Like the power of a Sigma to charge ults very quickly by just being incredibly consistent with the fundamentals of the primary weapon. Getting those ults up first means that you can counter the Genji's blade. You can shut down an enemy amplification matrix by picking the enemy team up so they can't use it, right? Like you have this incredible counterplay potential on your ultimate, and you only actually get there if you can charge it quicker than the other team, if you can stay ahead. And then, I mean, I think Sigma in particular just has a ridiculous skill cap this season, because if you can stun the enemy Sigma, hit that incredible long-range air shot with the accretion, it's like one of the hardest skill shots in the entire game, with how long it takes to charge and how slow the projectile moves. But if you can land it, it's a game changer, right? I just said how incredibly strong the ult is. Well, you just take that off the board if you can hit that shot. So it's just an opportunity, I think, for a lot of really top-tier players to just show that they're the best of the best. And that's why I think Sigma in particular, the best Sigmas in the league, they've got to be on this list because how much impact they're having this season.
So looking ahead to, or further onto the list here, the only other support besides Alarm to get nominated, Violet from the San Francisco Shock. And we know that pretty much everyone on the Shock should potentially be MVP candidates here. But what is it about Violet that sets him apart from the rest of the league?
Well, I think for Violet in particular, where I said Alarm has shown his strength on all these heroes, Violet definitely has that strength. In particular, I would say on the Zen and the BAP. But what's interesting about Violet is that he is just so good at the BAP, like so transcendently good and better than most players in the league at this Batiste, that the Shock don't want to take him off it. Like, they don't want to let him play other heroes because he is just a freak of nature when he brings out the BAP. And I think that makes total sense, that this meta with BAP being incredibly powerful, you want a player who's just going to more or less one-trick it, even though they have the fundamentals to do other heroes. And, especially Violet on the Zen, we know, I think that's another hero that he's especially crazy at. The Zen and the BAP together, which the common thread among those heroes is that they're very aggressive flex supports. They want to use their primary weapon and just get kills. And, you sort of are just like 2/3 of a DPS. And in Violet's case, maybe just a DPS straight up. And I think the way he's made so many aggressive plays with that amplification matrix, while at the same time continuing to do his job in a fundamental sense, like keep doing the basics, keeping his team up, that's like a default for Violet. The fact that he can do that so well and efficiently that he can then go off for more plays to become an actual DPS, a playmaker for the squad, getting his own kills and supporting his team while they do it on the other side, I think it's incredibly impressive that like this level of mastery on a hero is... the only thing I think I could compare it to would be like Jonak Zen in Season 1, where he's just like on another level with the hero. Maybe there's a few players who are starting to get close, but it's clear that, to me, that watching Violet play, he is near perfect on Batiste. Like, he's gotten to a level where I can see why the Shock want to keep him on that hero as often as possible.
And speaking of DPS, the last two that we have on our MVP list is Yaki from the Florida Mayhem and Eileen from the Guangzhou Charge. So what is it about these two that makes them MVP candidates? I
think in Yaki's case, it's really like revitalizing the Florida Mayhem and giving them, a real superstar, I think, to rally behind. In particular, for him, I notice his Genji and his Mei as being massive playmakers. Like, Yaki was one of the first players to bring out the Genji before the buff came in, like just playing it into the Orisa mirror comp, just being really confident in those blade combos, and that's in a world without nano boost, right? So it's an even more difficult fight for Genji. You're forced to battle Tracer on occasion, which is not... So it's a close matchup for Genji, but certainly Tracer favored, I would say, at the highest level. So the fact that Yaki's just so confident on that Genji, and he can play the Tracer when it's needed, and then, those are like the flashy heroes he plays, but I think the Mei is actually really where his strengths lie. Like, he is incredible on the Mei. He's really been, I think, a unique player on that hero in terms of how consistently he gets value on the walls, how fast he charges up the Blizzard with just incredible accuracy. It's one of those heroes that, like, I would compare it to a tank or a flex support, where you won't necessarily see them lighting up the kill feed, but their impact is not on the kill feed necessarily. Their impact is in lasting incredibly long in the team fights, getting out a ton of cooldowns, generating value, being a distraction. And although it does take a little bit more of a trained eye to see, how effective he's being, I can definitely attest that it's a top tier Mei coming out from Yaki, and it's been a real strength for Florida whenever that hero is in the meta. And then to go to Eileen, I think it's different in terms of the hero pool. I think Eileen is definitely a flanker specialist, but the fact that he's shown strength across all of the flankers, Tracer, Sombra, and Genji being like the most noticeable that he's incredibly good at, but also the Doomfist, and then even going beyond that, like he does occasionally play other roles. But I think you want this guy on flankers. Like, you don't want him to switch off because he just has such a natural talent for the flanker role, being able to stay alive incredibly long and still create a ton of space, be a massive thorn in the side of his opponents. I think he's just a very hard player to play against. And in particular, watching his Sombra and his Tracer this season, I think has really evolved to be on that level, whereas Sombra has kind of always been there. I just think that's been massive for the Charge. Whenever they can play a flanker-based composition, Eileen is really, really consistent and succeeds pretty much on whatever flanker you put him on. He's always going to be creating space for the team, always succeeding.
So those are your lists of MVP candidates, and currently, according to the voting, Xe, Alarm, and Fleta are leading the charge, with Carpe coming up just in the back there, but everyone else pretty far behind. So my question to you then, Jake, who is your MVP pick for the 2020 season?
I gotta say, I mean, regardless of the votes, I'm gonna say it's Gicheol Bin. I think it's likely that the tank players won't win the vote this season because, as you said, it's just not as obvious when they succeed. But to me, I don't care about that. I don't really care necessarily what the public thinks, what people notice, because for me and like my experience playing the game, I think you got to just like look for value where it's being had. And of course, these DPS players contribute a ton, but where's the most value coming from an individual player? It has to be the off-tank role this season, whether it's Sigma, whether it's Zarya. I think Choi is particularly dominant on these heroes. Another player I would have loved to see on this list was Hanbin, actually, from the Paris Eternal, because I think very comparable to Choi, just incredible game impact on the off-tank role. I think those two players in particular I notice. And probably it's going to go the way of a DPS, or like Alarm is a player who's made those massive plays as well from a different position. It makes sense that that's the most popular voting. And I do think there's no bad choices here. Like, it doesn't matter who you vote for, in the sense of everyone here deserves to be an Overwatch League MVP. And my vote is just one vote among many. So what I think matters most is that everyone gets out there, puts your vote in. Who do you think should be the Overwatch League MVP? Because my thoughts, whatever, I can talk all day, but what matters is who wins this vote. What matters is who the people want to see as that MVP, want to see lift that trophy.
Oh, and I have to agree with you as well as Choi Obin. Watching him play the Sigma specifically, seeing him put in positions where it's just him and maybe one or two other people on the team going up against the entire 5-6 of the other team, and watching them actually be able to hold off or turn fights around. I think it's undeniable the impact that Choi Obin has on the battlefield. But guys, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for watching the Owl's Nest, and before you go, make sure you click that bell to subscribe to our channel and get all the notifications on the latest videos here. And as for you comic book lovers out there, you can't miss the Other Identity podcast. That's the latest comic and film news and insights, hosted by former Marvel insider Ben Morris and your resident comic book expert, myself, Robbie Landis. Catch it now wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure that you're following Jake at JakeOW on Twitter and Jake_OW on Twitch and YouTube. And until next time, guys, stay on the payload.